If you enjoyed the channel and our video content and would like to support us, you can do this in a couple of ways. You can sign up to our Patreon site, which is a monthly subscription to one of our 4 tiers, each giving you something different from early access interviews up to exclusive unseen footage. There's also the option of a one-off donation via PayPal, which allows you the option to donate an amount of your choice. Both options really help to keep this channel going and to continue putting out regular content for you good folk. So please take a look at aircrewinterview.tv/donate, and I thank you in advance. Thank you and enjoy. So TEO, when did you become interested in aviation?
Oh, that is a long time ago. I think from childhood, it's always been extremely fascinating. And I remember having, being a young boy, having dreams of flying. Of course, without a plane, just myself, and being extremely fascinated with the 3D option that flying is. That you're not, the freedom in flying. I think that was it. And then it was kind of dormant for a long time until I saw a couple of F-16s when I was doing my time as a conscript in the military, as an army conscript. A couple of F-16s flew by, and that kind of it rose that attention to the aviation world again.
Absolutely. So let's talk about your flying training. You went to Canada to fly, I think it was the Harvard and the Hawk. Was this like a usual path for Danish pilots?
Actually, it was supposed to be. We joined that program, the NFTC, NATO Flying Training Canada. We joined that just around when I started my flying training. Before that, we were, as we are now again, back to the NATO training in the NGEPT program in Texas, so the US program. And it has been actually, historically, it's been back and forth between the two programs. So originally, back in the 60s, we had our former chief of defense, one of the first pilots in the Danish Air Force to fly the F-16. He got his training in Canada as well. Back in the days, I think he was 1962. Best graduate at NFTC. Well, back then it was called something else, I guess. But we in the beginning of this century, we started to train in Canada again. So I was the second team there from Denmark, and so just coming back there, and then we've been there for I think 6, 8, 10 years, and then now we're back to training in Texas again.
Nice. So how long did you spend over there on your training detachment, and when did you know you were going to go F-16s?
Well, the thing is that there was a deal, of course. A lot of stuffs about training is always based on deals on programs, right?
Yeah.
So we bought the Challenger back then, the CL604 Challenger aircraft from the Canadians, Bombardier. And part of the deal was we went back to Canada for flying training, and we had 6 students go through NFTC. 5 were to go fighter, and 1 was to go transport at that time. So the deal for my team was we knew 5 of us were going fighter, and since Denmark only have 1 fighter type, that was the F-16, and then 1 of our teammates would be on the transport training following the initial training in FTC. So that was kind of the deal for the first couple of crews that went to Canada.
Very interesting. So yeah, TEO, let's get stuck into the F-16 because that's what we're here to talk about. So can you tell us your first thoughts of the aircraft? Obviously, you mentioned before that you saw a few F-16s over, but it's an absolute stunning jet, isn't it?
It is an amazing jet to watch, right? To look at. It's a very it radiates power and speed and agility just by looking at it. I often compare it to looking at an old Jaguar car. Has that fast look that even though it's old, it still has that very aggressive look when you look at it straight forward. the aerodynamic lines, the big mouth of the engine intake, and it just looks very powerful and very aggressive. And for me, the first impression was exactly that. There's a huge leap going from a trainer aircraft like the Hawk to the F-16, and I think that will come to a surprise for many young pilots when they transition from a trainer jet without an afterburner and they go into a more proper fighter jet. There's a quite a big leap there. So yeah. So first impression was wow, very powerful, very maneuverable as well, and you actually had to be everything just moves faster, right? So everything has to happen faster. Also, your thought process and the way you plan your flights, because everything just happens very, very fast.
Yeah. So what was the role of do you call it the Viper in Denmark? Is that what it's called all over the world, the Viper?
I think that's the common nickname, the Viper.
Yeah.
So for us, a very small air force in Denmark, the F-16 has always had a multi-role. So initially, of course, I'm speaking after the 90s, of course. In the very beginning, it was as everybody had it, a light multi-role fighter, but more like a light interceptor fighter type. And then during its development into the MLU, it became more of a multi-role fighter.
Yeah.
And because Denmark has such a small air force, we used this as such as a multi-role. So the role, ever since I started, was both air-to-air and air-to-ground. So not into seed, but all other mission types. Back to the day where we had TASMO, if you know that, attacking vessels, Navy vessels and stuff. So very multi-role. And then in the later stages, of course, still with an air-to-air role, but focused very much on air-to-ground. And a big thing in the 2000s, of course, was the introduction of close air support and dynamic targeting air-to-ground mission types.
So can you talk us through some of your ground and flying training on the F-16? And yeah, did it feel like, like you say, coming from the Hawk, did it feel like just a complete leap forward?
Well, I'm not going to say anything bad about the Hawk, of course, but it is different. It's British, and one of the fun things flying the Hawk and then transitioning to other aircraft is a small technical thing, like it has a not a gear lever but a button. So you have to push a button to get the gear up, and you have to pull a lever to use the flaps. And that always made for interesting formation takeoffs. I remember in the Hawk, because you were looking at the flight lead out here, but you had to push a button over here to get the gear up, which was kind of like, okay, where is he? Where's the button? And because hitting a button is remarkably difficult from just raising a lever. You can just kind of, without looking, feel and pull, right? So, but anyways, we did, at some points in Denmark, we've done the entire training on the F-16 in Denmark. And that was what was going on when I was a student. And later on, we've had initial training in Tucson in the US. But I went through complete F-16 training in Denmark. We had our own OCU, so our own conversion. And I think that was approximately a little more than a year, and around 120, 140 flying out of simulators. And so the entire thing was here at home base.
Nice. So how did you find the cockpit? Obviously, there was a side controller there, or stick. How did you find that, TEO?
There is the very significant side stick of the F-16, the one of the first fly-by-wire jets, of course. Everybody knows that. And once you got used to that, it's actually one of the best arranged cockpits in the world, in my opinion. Of course, I have limited experience in other types, but the way you sit with your arms in a natural position, not having to move them around, of course, if you are left-handed and the stick is on the right, I guess that could be an issue. But the way you sit is it's very relaxed, it's very comfortable, and it feels very natural. And of course, the cockpit layout of having everything you need to do for actually operational flying, being on the stick and on the throttle for controls, and then you just look out, and you have the full glass canopy giving you an amazing view of the outside. So I think it's one of the best layouts any cockpit could have.
Yeah, absolutely. So what was your first frontline squadron, and what kind of flying would you be conducting on this squadron?
In Denmark, we had 2 squadrons at the time. One was dedicated to the International Reaction Force, so like a NATO thing, and the other was more of a training squadron, getting into initial training. So the first mission type you learn out of the OCU in Denmark is, of course, air-to-air and air policing.
Mm-hmm.
Denmark is located very strategically with access to the EC, and of course we have our not our opponents, but we have the Russian sphere of interest very close to us, to the east. So the first mission set you do is, of course, air-to-air and air policing. We still have many encounters with Russian surveillance, Russian fighters over the EC. So that's the first mission set you, as a young pilot, get to do. So for us, it's actually as soon as you had your training, you go straight into having QRA duties.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first mission types is actually joining on Russian jets. So
wow.
you go straight at it, right? It's
straight in the deep end.
Of course, that mission is not a hard mission, because it's a strategically it's not about shooting and killing. It's about politics, right? So it's a very important mission, but it is an actual mission that you go into as a young wingman. So that's the initial mission type set we go out to, and then of course during the initial squadron training you work yourself up to LFE, so large force employments, Comeo packages, strike missions, and all those more advanced mission types.
Yeah, and did you work with, or do you work closely with the other F-16 nations, who operate the F-16 in Europe?
Yes, the EPAF nations, as they are called. So initially that was Denmark, Norway, Belgium, Holland, and Portugal joined as well. So those nations have always worked close together on developing our F-16s and also training together, of course. We are located very close to the Netherlands as Holland, so we can fly with them in training areas close to each other. So that's been kind of a continuing thing through the entire life of the F-16 in Europe.
Yeah, and I know you get exchange pilots, but do you ever get exchange pilots from the other F-16 nations? You go to their base in squadrons, or is that not a thing?
We've had a tradition for exchange pilots all the way with our closest allies. So actually not from the other European F-16s, but we've always had an exchange with the US with their F-16s, and also with the UK. So we've always had a close relationship with the UK, and we used to have a Jaguar exchange.
Nice.
So we had some of our guys going to the Jaguar in the UK, and then we had British pilots flying F-16s here. Unfortunately, that stopped just around the introduction of the Eurofighter.
Yeah.
And not to get political, of course, because the UK is our closest allies, but the feeling, like my personal feeling was like, okay, we've been flying Jaguars, and no offense, Jaguars are shit jet. And you guys have been flying F-16s in our fancy jets, and now you get a fancy jet, and we're not allowed to go fly that. No, so I'm just kidding, of course, but I think it stopped right around where the Eurofighter was introduced.
Right, that's interesting. Never knew that, TEO, but good information.
Yeah, we have a lot of former F-16 guys who had, as I recall them saying, some of the best times flying the Jaguar in the UK.
Brilliant stuff. But I'm guessing you have. But have you flown on any large exercises in Europe or even like in America or anywhere else?
I have flown most of them, yeah. So, of course, there's always been squadron exchanges around Europe. We've always had a standing agreement with a lot of flying training in the UK. We had exchange pilots there. So we used to go to the UK a lot to do emitter training on the Spade Adam range, for instance, and also low-level flying training around the lowlands and Scotland, of course, where the UK has some excellent areas for low flying training. And Denmark being extremely flat, the UK terrain was great for training low level in mountainous areas. So we used to do that a lot. And of course, we've had the pleasure of going to large exercises in the US, specifically red flag and green flag exercises. So my first real big exercise was 20 years ago when we did I was a kind of young wingman doing the red flag exercise in Las Vegas.
Yeah, must have been a lot of fun, I'm sure.
Great fun. I remember the squadron, one of the squadron bosses saying to me, "TEO, you need 500 hours on the type." That was a demand from the US that foreign air crews were only allowed to do red flag exercises if they had 500 hours on the type. And looking at the planning, I was just, if I was unlucky, I would miss that. So he told me, "Hey, if I put you on the roster for the red flag, I know you want that. You got to promise me you have the 500 hours when we go." So I was like, "Yeah, just put me on the list, and I'll make sure I get the hours." Because that was of course, great experience.
Yeah. And one of our favourite subjects on the channel, TEO, is DACT. So have you fought against the Hornets, F-15s, or even the RAF, which is probably the F-3, or even maybe Typhoon?
I have flown against all of them. Yes. So we went through Canada, as I said, and the fun part was they visited Europe a couple of years after that with their Hornets. So some of my classmates and some of my instructors from Canada were actually visiting Denmark with their F-18s. So we got some DACT in with them. A whole lot of fun, and it's always a great training experience to do DACT because of the different capabilities of each aircraft, of course, and also the visuals of not always flying against a similar aircraft. So that's great fun. We've done DACT against the Swedes with their Gripen fighter. Very similar performance to an F-16. It's a little smaller. It's actually hard to visually acquire it when it's head on. Very hard indeed. Also F-15s, a lot more fun because they're easier to see. They're as big as a football field, right? And they're also easier to gun because they're such a large area to shoot at. Eurofighter, we've had the pleasure of the British Eurofighter and also the Italian Eurofighter to fight against in DACT. The Rafale, the French, the Mirage as well. Mirage 2000. We've had exchanges in Orange, France, and also at the northern part of Italy. We went to do some what we call winter high training because of the horrible weather in Denmark in the wintertime. We went to France and Italy to do some training there. So a lot of DACT, but I'm still missing. I would have loved to fly against let's say the Raptor. That
Oh,
could have
yeah.
been fun. Yeah, would have loved that. But the rest of the aircraft types we've flown against, and of course the British Hawk has jumped us many times low level in the UK. That's
Yeah.
always quite an experience because they have no radar, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they know the terrain like it's their backyard. So when you're flying low level over there, you don't get any systems warnings, right? Because they're not looking at you with anything. So you have to use the good old eyeballs to find them. And I've had during my initial training, I've had one of the guys from Hunter Squadron come up on the radio. You're like, so Fox 2 on the Danish F-16 with the red missiles. And I'm like, looking back, going like, what? That's me. And we were flying in some low-level terrain that made it hard to actually look behind all the time. But that was kind of fun. It's DACT is always good fun.
Yeah, so I'm just going to push you on one little point here. So obviously you said you fought the Typhoons and the Rafales. How did you find each aircraft? Was one better than the other, or did you find them quite equal?
It kind of depends on the fight, right? In my humble personal opinion, the Rafale is the most difficult one of those two, right? The Eurofighter is very powerful, but in many ways more similar to the F-16 than the Rafale. Rafale is, again, in my opinion, more maneuverable and overpowered, and in a guns only fight, I would say that's the toughest opponent. The Eurofighter has, it has that auto recover thing if it goes too slow. That sometimes helps you out in a dogfight. So, but again, of course, both aircraft are overpowered compared to the F-16. So you have to choose your game plan wisely. Again, great training to fly against both of those. We had the pleasure because we had a UK exchange. So at one time we were in the UK doing our own low-level training, and he was now, our former UK exchange guy was now an instructor on the weapons course there. And he came up to us and said, hey, are you guys up for some fun when you're leaving? Because we were flying home, I think it was the Thursday or Friday. And he said, yeah, some of our guys are doing a DACT mission, but we would like to, or no, maybe not a DACT mission, but they were doing an advanced air-to-air mission, and we would like to introduce you, unknown to them, into the fight. Right. So once they merged, they would not know what aircraft type it was because it wasn't a Eurofighter, right? So of course we had like half an hour before we had to bingo out to fly home to Denmark. So we were in on that, of course, and had a great training flight with those guys. And I think they were a bit surprised when it was not a Eurofighter but an F-16 that showed up when they were merging. So
that's great.
Yeah.
But have you ever flown on live ops? And did you feel the F-16, if you have flown on live ops, was the F-16, in your opinion, still capable to be in this environment?
Most definitely. I've done many operations starting out 15 years ago, back in Operation Odyssey Dawn, Libya. So that was my first real, I would call it real mission, right? And the F-16 is very capable, primarily because of the continuous updates. When you have so many nations flying a jet, it means it gets updated, and so back then it was a very capable jet for those missions, and especially the multi-role. It's a great multi-role jet, and we saw that there because we were expecting one type of mission and experience something else, and because of the versatility of the F-16 and the versatility of our weapon suite, we were very successful in that operation. And also in ops like Enduring Freedom, the operational part there, F-16 was ideal for that. Of course, nowadays, F-16 will still be a great jet for many missions, but in some environments, as we see now, you need a fifth-gen fighter.
But it sounds like you had a great time on the F-16 operationally. But have you got a couple of stories you can share with us, our viewers, that stick out in your mind from flying on that operation before we move on to your demo time?
Oh,
Yeah, it's probably hard.
it is very hard, but I mean, one of the things I think made the F-16 great operational was the compatibility with other air forces. So, for instance, I remember very, very clearly that the speed with which we launched and operated for that first mission of mine was incredible. It was like 3 days from political decision, it's a go, to we were actually doing operations from Italy. It was so fast. When we launched, I flew in a charter jet, and some other guys flew the jets down. And it was so fast, I didn't know where we were actually landing, so where we were going to operate from, because of the speed of the deployment and the urgency. And I think what really helped us there was that the F-16 is commonly used. So when we land somewhere, we can always get help from allied partners, because so many people operate systems that align with the F-16, or they operate the F-16 themselves. So I remember landing at Sigonella Air Base, and we were one of the very first allies to come there in the very beginning of the war. And of course, urgency was there. And the boss came over and he said, he was assigning tasks, you do this, and they discovered that we were lacking our NVGs. So there's only so much stuff you can put in a Hercules to transport with you. And I think the NVGs were scheduled for a week later to get there. So the boss comes up and like, hey, TEO, I think we might be, some of the guys are going to be assigned to do night flying very soon. Can you find us some NVGs? And I'm like, okay, yeah, because ours is going to be delayed. They're back at Squadron. They might not be here until maybe 3 days, 4 days. And we might launch, tomorrow night. So I know there's some Americans on base. It was a joint Italian-American base. He's like, try to find me some NVGs. I'm like, okay, let's go, right? We just landed in Italy. I have no idea of where things are. Yeah. But I knew, because I could see on the ramp, there was a C-130 compass call. So the spec ops type. And I'm thinking, those guys, I'm pretty sure those guys fly the same NVGs that we do. So in a couple of hours, I locate the guys. It's a Marine Corps detachment coming back from operations inbound the US. And those guys were just told to stop, stay put, stay in Italy, and we'll assign you a task. And, they've been, I think, I talked to one of the guys, they've been away for like 4 or 5 months, and we're just waiting to go to the US. And they're like, nope, stop in Italy, await further orders. And so anyways, I walk into to their building, and hey, can I talk to somebody in charge? And the boss there's like, yeah, hey, good to see you. Welcome to the, they're always very goal-minded, the US Marine Corps. They were like, yeah, welcome to the fight. How can I help you? And I'm like, yeah, so this is the situation. We have no NVGs, and I think you guys are using the same as ours. Is there any way we can? He's like, no problem. We have NVGs. I'll have my quartermaster help you out. And it took me, I think, half an hour. The guys found some NVGs, and I came up to his office, 4 sets of NVGs. They had the exact same type that we were using on the F-16. Wow. That would suit our brackets for our helmets. So it was perfect. And those things are quite expensive, right? And I'm like, so how do we do this? And he's like, yeah, no worries. You can just write me an IOU. So he took out one of those yellow stickers and looked at my name tag. He's like, oh, so you were captain, so and so. Okay. Wrote down my name, 4 times NVGs. And he's like, just put your signature here. And it's like on a yellow, stick it, right?
Post-it note, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, I sign it. And he's like, you're good to go. Just come back with them when you're ready and have your own. go get him, Semper Fi. And I'm like, okay, well, of course, thankful. I'm like, that's so cool. So I think within 3-4 hours, I'm back to the boss saying, here you go, 4 NVGs. And then we launched our first night mission the night after that. So, yeah. So I remember that very clearly, the eagerness of everybody in the alliance to make this happen. I brought that. He was a major. I brought him a bottle of Jack a couple months later.
Nice.
Thanked him a lot for the we could borrow the NVGs, and I think he was still there. I've been home between those times, but his crew was still there, right? So,
wow, that's amazing. What an incredible story.